the money man, Gary Sasse. A Southerner, is there anything left of the South? Is this like Sherman rolling through?
Yeah, there's a BMW plant, there's a Mercedes plant. There are a few things left.
Yeah, they got a few businesses, few employees cooking
They
along.
have most of our jobs.
They actually have some people can clean up the mess too,
Yeah.
as well. So it's been a little bit of a crazy business week with a couple of big announcements, which are both related and on the opposite ends of the business spectrum. We've got Arnold Bromberg coming in this afternoon, the CEO of Benny's, in a little bit. Of course, we'll have Saul Kaplan. He'll have some insights into Biff, but last week was announced that Amazon was going to open their second corporate headquarters, 50,000 jobs, average salary $110,000, $5-6 billion investment, and they claim to be saying they were throwing the ball up in the air and see which best city could win. And then by Friday, 700 in the region were getting let go as the 93-year-old Benny's was announcing that they were going to close all of their stores in southern New England. So you had the two worlds almost collide here in Rhode Island. We seem to be not well prepared for either one of them. Your thoughts?
Well, first on Amazon, I think it shows more than anything else that we have to think of ourselves as part of a regional economy.
Absolutely.
And Amazon, coming to New England and the Northeast makes a lot of sense. It also, in my opinion, makes sense for us to try. Because if you don't, they say the lottery, if you don't play, you don't win.
Right.
So you need to play. And the region's good. We have some advantages here, some disadvantages here. So I think it's good to throw the ball in and put your best shot at getting Amazon. First of all, from Amazon's perspective, if Amazon ever came to Rhode Island, they would run Rhode Island.
Yeah.
This would be a place where they would actually control a state.
Right, that's right.
And
In Seattle, they just control a city.
Right, so that's not insignificant, particularly being in this region. And so I think...
Listen, could they do worse running Rhode Island than Rhode Island does running Rhode Island to some degree?
Well, I turn the question around. They could do better running Rhode Island than they do running Seattle.
Yeah.
Because, so that's, I think those are all positive, and they're indicative of what's going to happen. Amazon has a warehouse up in Fall River.
Right.
On the downside, and this is what is the product of us not dealing with our long-term structural problems. 3 issues with Amazon. First issue is the workforce.
Right.
And the skill of the workforce, particularly if they're going to be 6-figure jobs. But look at it regionally, but we have some workforce issues. We have some siting issues.
Yeah.
What's the footprint? Where is the footprint? We haven't thought strategically. I like to use the example of what's happening at Iowa right now. Iowa just attracted a big research facility from Apple.
Yeah.
They ended up, to do that, they gave them a tax break. They gave them a $188 million property tax stabilization abatement program, plus a few other small things thrown in. We spent that much money on giving tax incentives for hotels and office buildings, and so it's the lack of strategic, thinking. We're very transactional. We look for short-term, wins instead of looking for, long-term game changes. So we have that problem. We have a problem of siting. We have a problem of the trained workforce, and we also have the problem of the quality of government in terms of the fiscal management of government. And so those are challenges that we face, but other communities that we would compete with would face similar challenges. I think it's worth a shot. I think, and also in taking this shot, one last thing, I know interrupt you. We ought to be very supportive of what's happening in Massachusetts.
Oh, absolutely.
And 'cause if that facility came to Massachusetts, they would get a cold and we have a cough. So there's a lot of opportunity. We need to play our cards right. We need to be very positive. We need to look at it regionally. We can say if you do come to this region, there are a lot of advantages to coming to Rhode Island.
So listen, we agree, I think from looking at this initially, from an editorial standpoint, I think we had a piece up on Friday about all the strengths. We may not have the greatest elementary to secondary educational structure, but we do produce a lot of smart college grads. Third highest percentage leaving the region, and one of the highest percentage of actually the population being in four-year colleges. So it's not, RISD Brown, URI, PC, you start piling them all up. So it's a lot of students, and instead of them going off to New York and Washington and Chicago, maybe they start staying in the region at a much higher percentage. So that gets you part of the way. And those are two innovative schools, certainly Brown and RISD.
Oh, yeah, and, in Bryant and URI's business
Absolutely.
school and engineering school, quite, good. So we do have some resources here. The problem that we always.
Would we be able to get any of the Bryant kids away from Fidelity?
Yes, the Bryant kids, I guess if the starting
If the money's
salary was-
good?
Yeah, who
Yeah,
knows?
right.
But the other issue too is scale.
Yeah.
And even though we have those assets that you've mentioned, they're not on a scale with Harvard and MIT
No.
and what exists in Massachusetts, and they're not on a scale with some other cities we compete with. That's why it's so important to sell ourselves as part of a region and really set ourselves as a good regional alternative to Boston, which we are.
Yeah, the problem there is if I'm Charlie Baker, there's no incentive for me to claim Rhode Island as part of my footprint. There's certainly a huge incentive for Governor Raimondo to reach out to Governor Baker and say, let's do this as sort of a twin city approach, maybe even a triad with kids coming out of WPI and Worcester, but it's only 50 miles apart. They're in 33 buildings in Seattle. A mammoth footprint, millions and millions of square feet of space. So, but I think we are surprised and somewhat disappointed in the lack of energy and proactivity in comparison to what other cities are already rolling out, where they're engaging people and naming chairs and building hashtags and creating some energy about it.
Well, I learned a lesson about over 30 years ago. I went with Terry Murray to meet with Governor Gregg of New Hampshire at that time, and Governor of Massachusetts, talking about regional economic cooperation. And it became very clear that Massachusetts was going to look after themselves
Yeah,
as we
right.
were and as New Hampshire. But it also became very clear, and we never built on these synergies, that there were things that we could do cooperatively that would enhance the competitive position that each of us were in. So if it's job training, if it's certain back office operations, there are potential opportunities, for Rhode Island in working regionally on this. But like I said before, we should be in there as a player. There's no
absolutely.
reason not to. We're giving our best shot.
Now, Amazon is a factor in killing off big boxes. The little box chain that I think all of us, have great fondness for, takes it between the eyes, and after 93 years, announces, ironically, just 48 hours after the Amazon announcement, that they would be closing up.
I'm anxious to hear from Mr. Bromberg as to the reasons, because I got the impression they weren't totally driven by economics. They were driven, certainly in part, and probably a significant part, by the changing nature of the retail economy. With the Amazons, with the big box stores, et cetera. But after as many generations as running a company, it does reach the end of the line. This happened to jewelry companies here, where there was no one in the family to take those companies over, and they just lost energy and lost.
There was a next generation at that company who had been in the company for a significant period. It's funny you say, jewelry. The older companies died off, and now you've got two very explosive, fast-growing companies in Alex Anani and Luke Andani, who have both sort of reinvented jewelry making and branding, et cetera. And obviously, the older generation jewelry companies in Rhode Island, most of the time, were not branded. These are actually branded products. Do you see anything unusual about the response here? We looked around and looked at what some of the other cities are doing. Immediately, other cities were pounding the business press, trying to get the message out about why their city could be competitive. And every major business publication in the country has written 2, 3, 5, 10 stories about who's going to win this and what cities are best suited. And we seem to be a little lackadaisical in getting that getting the message out to key business editors and reporters?
No, I haven't looked, so I haven't noticed, because, one thing this administration has done is they've been good with the national press.
Yeah.
They've been very promotional, I think to the point in some cases of spinning beyond the accomplishments. But I haven't noticed, that as a whole. But I think we're in a position where we need to step back, put together our plan, take our best shots, figure out where to work on the inside and where to work on the outside.
You were in the administration, the Kachiri administration. You obviously were part of teams preceding that as well as during that tenure in trying to bring in some major employers, Fidelity being one of them, a big win for Rhode Island. What was the key in attracting a major, significant, fast-growing employer at the time?
It was the tax change that we made to allow for the passive investment tax. And it was a no-brainer for us, because we weren't collecting anything on the passive investment tax anyhow. And we also had the fortuitous circumstance that Fidelity, I think, was looking at the high cost structure in Massachusetts, and they were looking to locate facilities in North Carolina and Texas,
right,
and Rhode Island. And I give the administration a lot of credit for, identifying, what would give us a competitive advantage. In the case of Fidelity, it was a change in the passive investment tax.
Yeah.
It was also, and people make light of this, one of the things that we talked about in the Kachiri administration was to develop site-ready paths. So when a company wanted to come in, the land was accumulated, the permits and the environmental issues were addressed, and we just happened to have an ideal location for Fidelity that was available, right away to develop on. So it was that space, it was the change in tax policy, which I think was the key, and it was the effective relationships that would develop, not just between Fidelity and the people in government, but people in the state who were in the financial services industry were very helpful.
Was there any human relationship? Was that a part of it? I mean, was it Governor Kachiri making a connection with the Johnsons, or was it your fine personality? It's the fact that they they thought that they might get you as an investor, right? The money man.
Talking about financial concern about that, but no, there were personal connections. I'll tell you, a story when we were working on the income tax structure.
Yeah.
And the models we ran, we lowered the top marginal rate from over almost 10% to 5.99%. And I think some of the models we had suggested it could be a 6% or 6.1. And Ned Johnson made it very clear to Governor Kachiri that it would be to our competitive advantage to have it below 6%.
Yeah.
Hence 5.99%. So yeah, of course, and then all those transactions, they're personal relationships, absolutely.
If you were going to give a little free advice to the administration on attracting, listen, 50,000 high-paid jobs is literally winning Powerball in economic development, and it may be the biggest jackpot ever. I've never heard of anything like this.
It's more than the 50,000 jobs.
The spin-off jobs would be remarkable.
The key factor in successful economic development is building clusters.
Right.
And can you imagine the kind of technology and commercial cluster that would come around in Amazon? The 50,000 jobs would be a down payment on really having an effective cluster. I think it's really selling, the state what's here, and then going to the company and agreeing to work with them on cleaning up some of the shortfalls we have.
Yeah. Listen, I appreciate it. It is a Rock'em Sock'em Monday on Business Monday. Mr. Bromberg is in the house, and then we've got folks from Navigant, and we'll be off and running.
Yeah, that sounds like you're having fun.
We are having fun, and obviously this week is the last week before they get back into the special session to clean up some remaining things over at the General Assembly. Last thing before you go, Mr. Moneyman, your bet on the Paw Sox.
I think the odds would be slightly in favor of them being successful here.
Unfortunately, I think we'll spend too much time on the Paw Sox and not enough for those 32 full-time jobs, and not enough time on Amazon.
Well, the issue that, has to be addressed, and this affects Amazon. Companies want to come to states, particularly a company like Amazon that just is in the driver's seat, that are fiscally well run.
Yeah.
And over the last couple of years, we've had a deterioration in our fiscal well-being. I can remember when Governor Raimondo submitted her budget for fiscal 18, it was assumed that there's a $185 million gap to close. It turned out to be about $115
Yeah.
million. And now we're projecting a gap next year of $237 million.
Right.
Which brings us back to the projections for 19 that we had during the Great Recession.
Right.
And so if you look at some of the fiscal decisions that are being made, companies want certainty.
Yeah.
And until we get our fiscal house in order, we can't guarantee anybody certainty.
I appreciate it. Money Man?